Many of you know that as a kid, I was something as a devotee of Fred Rogers, aka Mr. Rogers, of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Every day, my mother and I would sit together in front of our TV, and I would imbibe Fred Rogers' soothing tones of voice, quirky puppets, spectacular piano compositions, and guidance through all the difficult things which a tiny human faces, from taking a bath to using the potty to discovering how everything from erasers to macaroni were made. Now, my mom tells me I was so into Mr. Rogers that I actually used to dress up like him all the time. Necktie and all, although I couldn't be bothered to wear pants or even a shirt, just whitey-tighties and a blazer. I was a stud. Jules says this still explains why I'm so formal, right? Because, Mr. Rogers, he comes home and he doesn't even take off his necktie, he just changes into a sweater, which is why I never seem to change out of my suit when I come home at night. Such connections, though, between children and Mr. Rogers are dime a dozen, I know, which is no small testament to the power of this Presbyterian minister and the television pulpit from which he preached the gospel for some 30 years. And I have to say, I've been thinking quite a lot about Fred Rogers these days. Perhaps because of the beautiful little doodle that many of you might have seen this past Friday on Google's homepage. If you haven't seen it, go find it. It's really lovely. They did a fantastic job. It was commemorating the 51st anniversary of the filming of the show, which was this past Friday. Or perhaps the extraordinary documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor? If you've not seen it, please do yourself a favor and go do it. I cried for like 30 straight minutes. It will be a blessing to you if you take the time to watch it. Or perhaps it's simply that the virtues which Mr. Rogers espoused and embodied seem to be in such short supply in our culture today. Rogers is being celebrated quite a lot right now. Not only the documentary, but also the upcoming film starring Tom Hanks, which I'm very excited about. But it's worth remembering that his legacy is the subject of some pretty vociferous debate. The critiques of Mr. Rogers are typically associated with editorialists, the provocateurs of our mass media age, particularly with folks like Don Fader and the late Jeffrey Laszlo, who in their papers in the 90s and the early 2000s accused Rogers in print of having coddled an entire generation into entitlement, great inflation, laziness, and state dependence, producing a cadre of young Americans, including me apparently, who, because Mr. Rogers and others had told them weekly that they were special, now thought that their lives were supposed to come with participation trophies. Now let's ignore for the moment that this diagnosis of what's wrong with America leaves quite a lot to be analytically desired, and it does. But leaving that aside, I just don't see why Mr. Rogers is to blame. Or if he is to blame, why it's particularly blameworthy what he did. I want to read you an excerpt from the testimony Mr. Rogers gave before Congress in 1969 in defense of funding for public television. This speech, since the documentary came out earlier this year, has made the rounds on Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So you may have seen it recently. In any case, this speech sums up what I think is his philosophy, as well as the developmental psychology associated with psychologists like Margaret McFarland, which informed his work. I give an expression of care every day to each child, Rogers said. I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day, just by being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are. And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health. After which, Mr. Rogers went on to quote the words of one of his many songs which I committed to memory and still know and still sing. What do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole world seems oh so wrong, and nothing you do seems very right. It's great to be able to stop when you plan the thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and sing this song. I can stop when I want to. I can stop when I wish. I can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this. And know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. Now, I love that. And I love it in part because it is exactly what our lesson this morning from the letter of James asks us to do.